Hello everyone, this is Dikshak Bhatt from Team OYG. On behalf of our team, I welcome you all again on this virtual platform. Today we have a wonderful speaker all the way from Mauritius. Today we have Dr. Fatima with us. Dr. Fatima has done MBBS from the University of Mauritius and currently an aspirant for the USMD. She is having an extensive experience in the hospital settings as well. So I welcome you, Dr. Fatima, on this virtual platform and thank you for connecting with us. And now without a further ado, I would like you to take over.
Right. Thank you so much. So, as my introduction goes, my name is Fatima Alias Prateshi Fala, and I have recently graduated MBBS from Mauritius. And what I was told is that this is a platform of students to get in touch with topics which are not taught in conventional platforms such as universities, schools, and colleges. And I do honestly think that there are many such topics which needs to be touched, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this platform where I am personally getting this opportunity to speak about the topics which I feel I never learned in school, but later in life I did feel that somebody should have told me about them or taught me about them and such. For example, my husband is an engineer and he tells me that the one thing I want to learn in school is how to file my taxes, but I was never taught that. So I feel like, especially in the Indian curriculum, which we are from CBSE and such things, it's a lot about what just passing the exams. So one such topic that I will be touching upon from my personal experience is, if you are pursuing a career abroad, how important it is to be in touch with your family and your loved ones and your friends and everything that you have left behind. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the first
That's
point
actually
that I
quite,
would like to,
yeah. Just a
I'm
second.
sorry.
No, it was just participants. I'll just mute them. Yeah, you can continue.
Right. Uh, right. So the first such thing that I'm focusing on right now is the importance of keeping in touch with friends and family while studying abroad. Coming to the first thing, which is for the cultural affinity. So usually when we study outside the place that we have been born and brought up in, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
All right. Uh, so I was brought up in Dubai, and I was originally from Mumbai, but I've been brought up from Dubai since around 15, 16 years. And I was used to being in a certain environment, certain type of friends, a certain family, a certain social circle, and everything. And then when I moved to Mauritius, it was a completely different atmosphere, because actually I'm from Mumbai and most of my friends were from Delhi. So I got the whole people from Punjab, introducing me to Punjabi music and that kind of thing. And it was very different from what I had seen at home. At the same time, I began to be quite homesick, and I had a bit of an identity crisis in the middle, because I felt like the culture that I've come from is so different from the culture that I will be seeing in the next 5 years. So it made me to the point where I couldn't get who I am as a person. Like, what is my identity now? Am I the person I left behind? Am I the person that I have to be right here? And then it made me realize that there's no need to choose. You can be a different person in a different situation. When I'm with my friends, I'm a person. When I'm with my family, I'm a person. When I'm in a professional environment, I'm a person. But to do that, you need to be in touch with each aspect of your life. So right from the very beginning, I used to maintain a very healthy relationship with my parents. I used to call them at least once or twice a week. If it was not possible to do it daily, I used to video call my friends at least twice a month. And that always kept me in touch with the person that I was. And also, I didn't leave behind that part of my personality. And how that helped me is because I was always accountable to somebody. So when we're away from home, we experience a completely different level of independence. Everybody who has studied far will understand that. You sleep at your timings, you study at your timings, you have parties at your timings, and there's nobody stopping me. And at home, I always had the rod on my face, study, study, study. Over here, it is, if I study, that's good for me. If I don't study, it's bad for me. Nobody is going to make me do anything that I don't want to. So I miss that accountability. And when I left home, I was only 17 years. And it is not quite human to expect a 17-year-old to make all the right decisions at the right time. So because I always had a touch with the people back home, I was able to maintain this accountability that no, I am somebody. I'm still accountable to my parents. I'm still accountable to my family. I still have to answer back. So which is why I found that quite important. Another thing was that I never got homesick, because definitely sometimes when you're at home, whether it's home cooked food, whether it's the environment, the ease, just removing, stretching on the bed at the end of the day, having all my chores done for me, all of that was quite difficult. You don't get that in a hostel environment. I'm the one doing all the chores. So in that situation, I never got homesick, and I did find a few of my friends who thought that now we've got this independence, अब तो फ्री है, अब तो कुछ नहीं है, अब तो जो करना है वो करेंगे, that kind of attitude. And it's very lightening for the first 1 or 2 months, after which I began to feel that they are feeling quite homesick, they are missing their families, they're not able to do as well, and we all need a change of space. So just being in that environment of freedom, and it was good till it reached a peak and then it fell, and it was never able to maintain a steady. So that's why I would really recommend being in touch with our families. And another thing that I did realize is the decisions that we have to make independently. Those are also equally important, because you do make your own independent decisions, and you do go out, and at the end of the day you might not always want to follow suit to what has been going on in your family from so many years and decades, because basically I feel those are just traditions, those are not decisions, those are not choices, those are traditions. So when you are into another environment, you do realize that you have so many other choices right in front of you which you can make for yourself. So in that situation, you adapt to the new environment, and you do see that there are certain things that everyone else is doing right, and you might want to adapt to those as well.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with that point because I have been to Philippines to study, so I can relate all the points you shared, and it's I totally agree with the what you have said. It's tougher to stay away from the family and do with the studies and everything to manage. One thing I wanted to ask here is that what was the spark that attracted you towards this healing medicine? What was
The
the first thing
spark.
that yeah.
Okay, so there were two instances. First of all, I used to watch the show Grey's Anatomy with a lot of zeal, a lot of enthusiasm. Like I would not miss a single episode. And my brother-in-law is a doctor, and he would tell me, real life is nothing like that. And that actually made me curious to see, what is that real life? Which you're telling me is so different, because this is so glamorous, this is so amazing. So what is the reality? And then the other thing is, when my sister had her first child, my nephew, and I went to the hospital in Pune. I was around, I think I was a 15, 16-year-old at that time. And when I saw the respect, when I saw I think it was my first experience visiting a hospital as such, because touch wood, I haven't had that kind of experience before. And when I saw the respect of the doctors, when I saw the decisions, when I saw the kind of life that they were living, the accountability, like it wasn't just a job, it was like the entire life of the hospital. And I realized that this is where I belong, this is what I want to do, and this is the kind of decisions that I want to make, and so that's why I had to do it. And as hard as I had to crack the Indian exam, which was impossible, I was never one of those genius children, but I wanted to prove that being a very ordinary person, like an ordinary student in UAE, maybe above average, and not having an extremely very well off financial background or anything, but all it takes is a spark, all it takes is that hard work, all it takes is that passion, and anybody can do it. So I think, and I was not always getting a lot of support. Like a few of my family members, they were like, "You're going to stay far from home. Are you sure you can do it?" So there was that doubt. But at the end of the day, it was it was not, of course, I did get support from my parents and everything, but just that passion that I can prove myself as a very ordinary student. So anybody can. That's what actually got me through.
Yeah, it was really
And not
motivating
being
that.
a very genius,
Yeah, continue.
yeah, and not being a very genius student, in my first year itself, I scored two distinctions, which made me believe that I can do it over here because I'm really interested in doing it. I was never one of the top scorers in school or anything. But when I got those distinctions in my first year, I'm like, okay, then this is where I belong. So that's what really got the spark going.
It was really motivating, and the way you shared it was inspire a lot of people today to continue the dreams. One thing here I wanted to ask that there are so many therapies and so many other subjects, so among them which are your interest, like for masters you wanted to pursue particularly in which field?
So I'm looking towards pursuing a master's in internal medicine. So I want to do my residency in internal medicine in the United States of America. And my life partner, my husband right now, he's equally supportive to that goal, that dream. So with his support, that's what I'm planning to do. I'm planning to pursue in that sense. And I do know that you have a degree in alternative medicine. So I believe that healing as a process is like a whole. You have to tap into both allopathy as well as, Ayurveda and everything. And that's how we can heal uh, an individual
Yeah,
as a whole. We can't just, medicine is, I feel like the medicine, the conventional source, the tablets, those are helpful only physically, but mentally it's all about how much the patient believes in this type of therapy. And I feel especially the older generation, they seem to cure more by the Ayurvedic, by the natural sources. And I think it's very important to make them comfortable in the environment and not just imposing our views on them. So that's how
yeah,
I would
that's
see it. So
definitely I would agree with that. That both pathies can go parallelly, and it will benefit more for the peoples and healing. So, one more thing here, I wanted to ask that is there anything particular lifestyle you wanted to suggest for the people, like ideal lifestyle for a healthy living?
yes, I'll talk about both physical as well as mental health. So in physical health, I feel like a lot of emphasis these days is on body image and body shaming is requires gaining a lot of popularity these days and the body image. So what I would like to say is that the ideal body image, the goal is not to attain a certain weight. It's not to be thin. It's not to, gain weight or lose weight or anything. It's just to be fit. So when you attend the gym, when we are dieting, anything, following a diet, it's not so that you can be thin, so that you can fit in the dress, or so you can gain weight, anything. It's just to be fit, to have stamina. Because we see our parents and our elders at this date, they are able to maintain such a fit lifestyle. They manage jobs, they manage children, they manage to do so many things. And I honestly sometimes have a backache at the age of 23, and I'm like, my lower back is paining, which makes me feel like our generation is not given that kind of strength and stamina. So every time you do anything, when we eat healthy, the only goal is to be fit. Because even if you're not able to gain that scale, the weight on the scale that you're looking for, as long as you physically feel more fit, you feel more active, you feel like you have more stamina, it is helping. Because I don't want our generation to be demotivated just because those few pounds are not being shared. I want us to know that even if we are not shedding those pounds by following a healthy lifestyle, we are being more fit, we are having more stamina, and that's what matters. And we are more comfortable in our own skills. Talking about mental health, I have read a very recent article which I read on Forbes that being overworked, being busy is, it's romanticized. It's a good thing, but it's not. You do need to have space. You do need to have your time to relax. And that is what's a good thing, is to maintain that healthy work-life balance. Being overworked, being constantly busy, not having any time to sleep. It's all like seen as, that's how life should be in the youth. But that's not true. Yes, we do have to work hard, but at the same time, you do have to need your time to chill and your time to relax and spend, because the human body in itself is a machine, and the more you overwork the machine, the sooner it is going to stop working and become tired, and we don't want it to reach that stage.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree on that point. So it was really, the tips you gave, it was really nice. The one question here arises that if a patient comes to you with the lifestyle disorders, like they have to change their lifestyle. So how would you manage that kind of a patients? Because sometimes the patients are, stubborn. They do not adopt the new lifestyle, but which is healthy for them, but they still don't understand the importance of that. So how would you manage that kind of a patients?
So in my last year, in my year of dependent internship in Jawaharlal Nehru Hospital, I had a patient. He was a diabetic patient, and he wasn't willing to diet. He wasn't willing to exercise. And I think that, there was a false sense of bravado that, हमें तो ये सब होता ही नहीं है. We are fine. हम तो ठीक हो
Yeah, yeah.
जाएंगे. And I told him that I'm not imposing my decisions on you. This is what I suggest. But I would suggest that you try my thing for a month. If you feel healthier, you make the decision to continue it. And if you don't feel healthier, it's fine. But at least try what I'm saying. So I like to give control in the hands of my patient. I don't control them. I don't tell them that you need to do this, this, this. I make it very clear that if you don't do these are the consequences. It can lead to heart disease. It can lead to this. These are the consequences. But if you do these are the benefits. And now you experiment, and then you decide whether you want to continue with my kind of lifestyle or not. So when I prescribe the diet, I prescribe the Mediterranean diet, which is the diabetes diet that we do prescribe. And I told him that I want your HB1AC to remain below 7.5%. And I gave him all those targets. And I said, I want your blood sugar to always be below 200 mg per DL. And this is the diet that I prescribe for that. It's light exercises. By the end of 2 weeks, he himself was more active as a person. His mood was better. The anxiety was real because he was getting Because of the lack of diet, he would have a very heavy breakfast and then have metformin, which would drop the sugar level suddenly, and he would be anxious and have panic attacks by the middle of the day and everything. And the month, because of the weight loss, it helped him personally see that no, this is helping me. So he just needed that motivation once, and after 1 month, it was his decision to continue on that lifestyle. So I think that's how in today's world, especially, it's no longer that doctors God, that concept is gone. Patients know more than us thanks to Dr. Google. I feel like he's the best doctor, done the most MDs.
Yeah.
Dr. Google knows everything. They seem to be very well informed. So in this type, I just prefer giving my patient the chance to make their decisions rather than imposing my choices on them.
Yeah, it's definitely required, because the spark should be come from the patients, and then it will help the increase the recovery rate for them. So the
Exactly.
question is that how will you build your rapport with the patients?
How do I build my rapport with the patient?
Yeah.
So first of all, I introduce myself. I add a bit of a personal touch. Like I tell them something quite, I think, semi-personal about myself. Like, I grew up in Dubai and I studied in Mauritius, just to build a familiarity to the places. I always try and speak in the local language of the person. Being an Indian, that gives me an advantage because even in Mauritius, we had patients who spoke many languages. So I know how to speak Gujarati, I know how to speak Hindi, I know Urdu, and obviously I speak English, and I learned a bit of French over there in Mauritius. So I always try to speak in the language that the patient is most comfortable in. Also, I try to understand their problem first before offering my solutions. So if they're in any kind of pain, I think the first thing that any patient comes to a doctor with is pain. And once you relieve that pain, you're already winning the confidence of the patient, because that is the main problem. So first I try to understand them, what their difficulties are, and then I offer my solutions and what I think the treatment should be. I try to avoid using medical jargon, like if I'm telling you take streptomycin, and just because I know what that is, I can't expect you to either. So I try to use simple words like antibiotics. My prescription might say cefuroximine, but my patient just needs to know antibiotics. I try to avoid feeling that superiority complex that, I know a few fancy terms or medical jargon. I use simple language which the patient can understand. At the same time, I try to build a trust in me. I try to sound like I do know what I'm talking about and you can trust me. I think with age, being young, especially in my internship, the first question was, can we speak to a senior? Aapse koi bada hai, can we speak to a senior? So just in that time, I have to understand that, no, I do know what I'm talking about. I can help you. And also, I never had overconfidence. So if I feel like this is something I cannot handle by myself, like when I was handling the OPDs in Mauritius, many times there were patients with complicated sutures. I felt like, secondary debridement is not something that I want to do. So I never had ego. I used to always be very okay in calling a senior. So in that situation, if the patient does come back to me, they know that I'll only treat them if I know exactly what I'm talking about. That's how I build the rapport. And the most important thing is follow up. So any advice, anything that has been given, my prescriptions will always end in follow up in 15 days. So that way, also, even in the legally, I'm not liable to anything because I have told you to come back to me. In case the diagnosis is wrong, in case I prescribe some wrong medicines, I can always correct myself because we are all human beings. Everybody can make a human mistake. So I
Yeah,
always ask them to
definitely.
follow up with me in 15 days. And then they always feel like, no, they are still connected. If they have any other problems, I call them back in 15 days.
That's really great tips, and how to start with the students here listening, so it will help them as well. One question is here that how do you manage your patients with having a mental disorders? Because there are tough kind of patients. I believe that for the students to go pursue and ask them questions because they are not that outgoing and expressive. So how do you manage a patient with a mental disorders?
Okay. So first of all, I like to believe that physical health and mental health is the same thing. So if I had a fracture, I feel no shame in going to a doctor, right? In the same way, if I'm going through a bout of anxiety or depression, there's still no shame in going to the doctor. So the first thing is to normalize mental health, to treat it as a very normal thing. It's not at all something that needs to be stigmatized or not at all something that we need to, think that the person is any different. So just when you treat that person with empathy but not sympathy, that solves half the problem. Often, we treat them as a pariah, that oh, he or she is going through depression or anxiety. That's not true. It's normal. It's like having a fracture, right? So the
Yeah.
important thing is to empathize with the person. And apart from that, so when you deal with a mental disorder, there's many mental state examination, which we have to understand in the first 5-10 minutes of the person, that how is the person's environment, How willing is he to accept that he has a mental disorder? In my psychiatric postings in university during my internship, if I tell a patient that you are suffering from depression, they are first of all saying, no, 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 we don't have any such problem. This is just small, small, small. They are not willing to accept. So the first thing is to get that acceptance. So to get that acceptance, you need to normalize the disorder. So as casually as I would say you have a green stick fracture, that's how casually I would say you have depression. It's normal. You can have a mental disorder. After the acceptance, you need to understand the level of the patient's education, because not everybody, especially I feel in our Indian culture, everybody's not educated enough to sort of understand what the consequences of their illness are. So you need to explain them that this is what you have, this is the consequences, this is what can happen, and you have to get that acceptance and that willingness to change at the same time. And then when we give advice, especially in psychiatric, you can't just advise, you give fluoxetine, you give antidepressants, helium, lithium, whatever. That's not the only solution. You need to change the person from the environment. If they're in a toxic relationship, if they're in a toxic environment, if they're overworked, if they're stressed, if they have suicidal tendencies, everything that needs to change around the person. Only then will the antidepressants or antipsychotic medicines actually work. And apart from that, we also need to counsel the families. It's very important because often the loved one is tired of dealing with this person. Especially, I see, parents of children with schizophrenia or something like that. They're now tired. They don't want to deal with this anymore. They don't know how to, because mental illness is usually a lifelong illness in many cases. So you need to counsel the family as well that this is what it is. This is how you can help. This is what you can. This is what you should not say to the patient. And then you also have to accept that nothing can be perfect. There will be instances where there might be a relapse. There will be instances when despite your best treatment, there's no effect. So that way I used to find psychiatric patients not as satisfying as patients with physical illnesses, because, it's not like I give them antibiotics for 2 weeks and the next week they're fine. It's a lifelong treatment. So we have to be very patient, I feel, in mental illnesses.
That's really great approach to talk with the mental illness patients, and I would like to adopt some of the things you said in my practice as well. So these are some great tips I get today. Question here is that right now, talking about the diseases, so the current scenario is that the COVID-19 is here. So how is your approach towards the COVID-19?
So I feel like the COVID-19 had, a triple approach in us. So in the beginning of the lockdown, there were two sets of people: those who were over worried and those who were just not worried at all. Those who were saying this is a fake illness, or those who were saying that this is not something that is actually, the virus is fake, and those who were worried in the sense they were stocking food for perhaps the next 5 years at home. So that was how it was. So people didn't really understand the concept of the pandemic. In fact, even as doctors, we ourselves had to go back and understand what the Spanish flu was, how it affected, and what a pandemic actually is. Because I had learned it in community medicine. It was one of those topics which you just skip through. I know the definition, but I never knew what it actually was. So even as doctors, we had to go back and kind of understand what a pandemic is. And then after that, I felt like COVID-19 patients, it was treated as a very, I don't know, it was being positive in COVID-19 was treated as a social outcast. It's like having a sexually transmitted disease. People don't want to tell you that they have it. People are hiding it from me. And I'm like, it's okay. It's just that you can get it. Nobody's blaming you for having the COVID-19. But to spread awareness, to accept that this disease, you do need to be quarantined, that was harder than actually treating it. And then after that, the wide array of treatment modules, like there was ivermectin, there was the steroids. Recently, we are using steroids. There were so many treatments and none of them were FDA approved. So because of that, people used to just come and tell me that I'm taking a prophylaxis dose of ivermectin for 3 weeks. So, ab mujhe to COVID nahi hoga na? And I'm like, what? Why? No. So we had to convince them. And then doing COVID duty in itself was quite depressing, because obviously I have seen deaths. I've seen so many deaths. And having people treating human bodies like just throwing them in funeral homes, you can't say goodbye. Often it's the earning member of the family. I've seen, patients crying. And because of the high over volume of, patients, as much as I want to comfort a patient's family, I simply don't have the time. If there is a daughter or a wife crying on my shoulder, I don't have the time. I have 10 other patients who I need to save. So I think that's why the backlash on doctors came, but it's simply because they were so overworked that I'm like, no, this life is gone. I need to save 10 others. and the ventilator, and constantly intubating patients. It was not an easy job, because so many times, when I'm trying to intubate, I'm seeing like it's not possible, it's causing pain, it's causing tears. And because of that, in my internship, I was expected to do things which aren't exactly at my level, like independent intubations. It became a daily job for me. So as such, as interns, we did learn more, but from the patient's point of view, you don't really want to be the to be very honest, you don't want to be a doctor's first incubation. It's not what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
So that way. And now I feel like, now with the second wave hit in India especially, I think that people are, taking it more seriously. They're understanding that it's not over yet, and unless we do not take precautions, it might never be over. And people slowly understand the seriousness of it. And but
Yeah.
now, yeah, and everybody's just looking for somebody to blame, be it the government, be it anything. But at the end of the day, we all have to take responsibility. We all have to stay at home. We cannot go out and have a chill time in the cafeteria and then blame the government because there's no oxygen cylinder. Let's try to reduce the need. If we cannot reduce the supply, let's try to act responsibility and reduce the needs of those oxygen cylinders.
It was really, really great that the tips you gave about the oxygen cylinders. I think everyone should need to, the whole India needs to listen this once at least. So yeah, there are the problems here we are facing in India right now, but hopefully the situation get better in future. Can you share your one experience regarding the patient experience?
Of COVID-19?
And any diseases?
Okay, so I think one of the most patient which touched my heart, I think definitely from quite a personal aspect also. So once in Mauritius itself, there was a patient, and it just showed me the unpredictability of life. She was suffering from COVID-19. She was a newlywed, and they were in Mauritius on their honeymoon. And because they had a 14-day quarantine period in Mauritius before you're allowed. So from the quarantine itself, she was tested positive, and she was shifted to a facility. And that's where I was posted, in the quarantine facility. And she was a young 25-year-old, and there was no comorbidities, no diabetes, no hypertension. Just she was mildly anemic, and that's it. For privacy, I will not use her name, of course. And
Yeah, perfect. Fine.
so she was fine. So the first day in Mauritius, we just follow the symptomatic treatment. So as usual, IV paracetamol and fluids and rest. And then the antiviral drugs were actually quite expensive. So they were not exactly used in Mauritius, and neither did the patient require them according to us. So we did not actually give her something. She had mild breathing difficulties. So for that, just steroids were given, like salbutamol. We had her to inhale salbutamol pump, and then that's it. I was expecting her to be fine. And then by the fourth or fifth day, we told her husband that you can come and collect her. And, she's tested positive twice. And that's the protocol. After testing positive twice, after testing negative twice, you can be discharged. The same day that her husband was going to collect her, she suddenly had ARDS. She presented with acute respiratory distress syndrome. Her PaO2 decreased, her PCO2 shot. It was type 2 respiratory failure. And none of us could understand what happened. So we held her husband out at the door, and the seniors were trying to, intubate her. But the airways had inflamed so much that it was impossible to even get the tube in. We tried to perform an emergency tracheostomy, which also didn't fare quite well. The patient was in the ICU, respiratory failure, which led to cardiac failure, which led to kidney disease, and finally to death. So to see a patient of 24 who was perfectly fine just die, and then we did the autopsy was performed, and even in the autopsy, we couldn't find anything which caused this. There was nothing which could explain why she went so severe from a normal to death. And then I realized how unpredictable life was, because she was just discussing with me that this is my honeymoon, I can't wait to go back, I want to do this, I want to do that. And to have that conversation with the patient in the morning, and to see her gasping for air in the evening, it was a really, which made me feel like, okay, this is like what you hear happens to other people, but I never thought I'll see it. And I was just an intern on the case, so I wasn't even involved in the life-changing decisions or something. But just to see that, to have spoken to her in the morning and see this in the evening, I think that really changed me and explained to me the unpredictability of life and the importance of a doctor.
Yeah, that's really great experience you had, and it inspires a lot people, and also gives the uh, information that how to react with this kind of situation. So it was really nice sharing your experience. Moving towards our sessions, that what kind of a struggle did you face while having this journey of a medicine?
So I feel like this journey has shown me both the rain and the rainbow. I always put it that way. There were a lot of struggles right from the beginning because, like you said, I was a pampered Dubai princess girl, and then to have to say that no, now I'm going to stay alone. I'm going to stay in a hostel. I'm going to stay in a cubicle-sized room with a roommate. Like, I think I have lived more closer to my roommate than I ever will to anybody else because it's such a small room with 2 beds in it. And to be that, I think that was the initial shock of it. And then to be away from family, to just make all being, like I explained about cultural affinity, to be in a completely different culture with new people, strangers. That was the initial struggle, I think, to sort of settle down into the place. And then, of course, the academic pressure hits you. In my very first year, to see BD Choresia, 3 volumes of Harper's Biochemistry, Physiology, and I'm like, okay, this is it. And they're like, no, there are guidebooks, there's guidance, there's so much more. So I think that's when the academic pressure hits you. And I remember for my semester exam, I was like, okay, volume 1 is only coming. And then they were like, no, that's just volume 1 for the first semester. And your props will have volume 2 and volume 3. And I'm like, oh, wow. So getting through the academic pressure, I think first year is the most difficult for me in my entire experience. That year is like, okay, this is so much. And you're thinking like, okay, it's grade 12 science, how bad can it be? It was, that pressure was really a lot. Then by the time you're in second year, I think second year is the longest of the all because it's 1.5 years and it really drags out. And those subjects are actually difficult, like pathology, pharmacology, and those are really important because the basis of pharmacology is throughout. You need to know pharmac and patho as a doctor, like on your tips, because that's what you need to prescribe, and everything just depends on that. And also in further, like for PG, when I'm doing my USMLE, the most important subjects are patho and pharmac. So that was my second year difficulty. And then in third year, I think it's a bit of a light time. And there's just, but the subjects, I think especially ophthalmology and community medicine, they're really volatile. They're not the most interesting, but you have to keep maintaining that thing. And then finally when you're in final year, you're like, it's almost done. But then there's medicine and there's surgery and there's pediatrics, and that is when your internship starts. And you're also now clinically responsible. That is the time when all relatives start asking, I have this, what do I do? I have that, what do I do? And sometimes it makes you realize how much little you actually do know. So yeah, and then the whole time I think from first year to final year, a lot of things happen. Like a few friends that I made in first year didn't probably last till final, but a few friends that I made around the journey, they are like my family now. I think throughout life, I'll be in touch with them and we will be talking. So many new relationships do come across and from the year, and you learn so much more. And I think it's important to know how much you don't know, because I feel medical students get an ego kind of thing that now up to doctor ban gaye, up to hame sab aata hai. But it's not until that you do your internship that you realize, we don't know anything. There's so much that we need to learn. So that humbling experience, just thinking that I've studied for 5 years, 4 years, I know everything. But once you're in internship, you realize, okay, despite all of that, you still don't know so many things. A humbling experience of that. And then, of course, the whole thing of watching my friends. And when I was in my third year, they were graduated, they had jobs, they had cars, they were living independent lives. And I'm still calling dad, monthly, month ka kharcha bej do. That was my life at 20 until I was, and looking at people really move on. So throughout life, the patience that you have to keep throughout those 5 years, and the hope that there is something better coming on, I think you have to cling on to that.
It was,
So
I
those are
can
the
relate.
struggles.
Yeah, I can relate all the topics you shared and all the experience you had. I had the similar experiences, so I can relate to all. And the way you explained is very much, inspiring and also the motivating to the students who are pursuing their career in medicine. So the last question from my side is that as you have the inspiration profile, so what would you suggest to all the students and all the listeners right now? Any suggestions that how skill should be a professional successful career?
I think the one advice I still hold, I will always remember, is make your choices, stick to them, and learn to make them work for you. There is nothing right, there is nothing wrong, there's no thing to follow as such, there's no textbook following in life in general. It's not like school, like there's a way that you have to follow. You have to make a choice that this is what I want to do, and you have to make it work for you, that this is what I did and it did work for me. And at the end of the day, once you become a success story, the journey is just a journey. The struggles become inspirations, and the everything, and it all becomes part of the success story then. So it's very important to be very sure about your choice, to get the support but not rely on it. I think it's very important to try and get the support from everybody you love, your family and everything, but you can't rely on it. At the end of the day, we have to, rely on only ourselves to constantly motivate ourselves and to always be very, very humble in terms of everything. There's always a lot more to learn. There's always somebody who will know more, and there's always something to get inspired by. So to be humble and just make our choices and make them work for you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Doc, for this your wonderful time, and this was such a lovely conversation with you. And we
Yes,
hope
me
that
too.
we
I
could
really,
connect.
yes, definitely.
So we
Thank you
hope
so
that
much.
in future we could connect again and have a wonderful another sessions with you with regarding another topics and your experiences we had. And also good luck for your USMLE, because we know that USMLE is tougher than the Indian exam. So I hope that you achieve
Yes.
your goals sooner. And once again, thank you so much for
Yes,
connecting
I
with
am.
us.
I've already started preparing, and I'll be writing the exam by September. So once I write the exam, I'll be able to talk more confidently about my journey and how I started and everything.
No, it's really wonderful because you gave the tips and it's really motivating. And we wish that you could achieve success in the first try as well. So thank. And once again, we would hope to that you could connect with us in future after USMLE as well, so that we
Yes,
could have
definitely.
utilize your knowledge again.
Definitely. It'll be my pleasure. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful experience for me as well. Thank you and goodbye. And good luck to everybody here. Good luck.
Bye bye. Have a nice day.